everyone, and welcome back to Teaching Natural. My name's Dare. I'm a fifth-year high school English teacher, third-year avid teacher in SoCal or Southern California. And this video is the first book dive in my professional development series. It is Better Than Carrots or Sticks, a restorative practices for positive classroom management. It is by Dominique Smith, Douglas Fisher, and Nancy Frey. The great thing about all three of these writers is that they are practicing teachers in Southern California. They actually teach very near to where I work. So it was good to see practical things for classroom management written from people who have used the strategies as well as people who are currently in the classroom or at the time of the book's writing were in the classroom. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background as to why I chose this book for my professional development. Then I'll go over the book summary, and then I will go through how I'm going to use this book in my classroom. So let's get started. Starting off, why I chose this book for my professional development over the summer. First, I had seen it from Megan Forbes, or Too Cool for Middle School, and she had been talking about restorative justice practices. And if you aren't familiar with restorative justice practices, it's coming from indigenous work. So it started with I believe it's pronounced Maori people in New Zealand, and how they were decolonizing their criminal justice system as well as their kind of community systems. And then other indigenous groups were doing the same work. And so it is really looking at, rather than punishment for behavior, looking at behavior as how does it affect the community? And yes, there are consequences for an action, but really looking at rebuilding the relationships between the community and recognizing the harm in the community. When I started teaching in 2017, there were it was kind of the start of restorative justice practices. This was coming from looking at the criminal justice system and the school to prison pipeline, and how zero tolerance policies had led to the increased criminalization of students. And so people were looking for ways to kind of stop that and do something better. And so my school district, before I left to finish my master's, my previous school district was starting to do restorative justice work, and then I became familiar with restorative justice work through my master's in Native American Studies. And so I wanted to kind of start implementing those procedures. That was pre-pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. During the pandemic, kind of classroom management was not a thing because we weren't in classrooms. And once we came back, I noticed that so many of the classroom management systems I had were not working because students forgot how to be in a community and how to work as a social unit. I'm gonna be honest with myself, I had less patience. And so I knew that I needed to kind of go back to the basics and get something that was gonna help me relook at my restorative practices, relook at why it had resonated with me so much, and how can I better implement these practices in my classroom. Book summary. So, carrots are rewards, sticks are punishments. And those are not to be confused with consequences. Consequences are just the results of someone's actions. But a reward is, an attempt at positive reinforcement, or a punishment is an attempt at negative reinforcement for the behavior. And so the researchers found that, as research has been done, carrots and sticks are not the best thing to help students kind of internalize the social skill. It focuses more on teaching students how not to be caught doing whatever the wrong thing is, rather than having students reflect on their behavior and how it affects the community. And so restorative justice practices really are a focus on the community, on what positive things have been done to the community, what harm has been done to the community, and how do we make amends, or how do we repair whatever is done to the community. So their classroom management practices focus on teaching students how to be better community members, how to have the social skills to have conflict mediation, how to manage external stimuli, they call it antecedents to the behavior, so that students might make a mistake. Of course, they're human. They recognize why it's a mistake, who is harmed, and then they have the tools to not make that same mistake the next time around. And so it really is about giving students the tools to have better social skills, to be better community members. The book talks about using positive language, saying how to act as a, insert your school's mascot, how to act as a member of the community, how to act in this classroom, on the playground, and so forth. This book specifically looks at, or is specifically written by high school teachers. However, they do a great job of showing lower elementary, upper elementary, and high school how these teachers are working with these practices. So it really is a good age range for teachers who are looking to do professional development with this book. The book talks about creating proactive strategies, so not being so reactionary, and that kind of helps eliminate the negative emotions that might come with behavior management or a punishment focused, rather than teaching students how to have the life skills to carry on into wherever they go post education. They talk about having a plan for when a behavior happens, in the moment, after, and having a re-entry procedure so that when a student has to come back into the community, the harm that's done is focused on healing rather than kind of just, oh, it's been so long, we're not even going to talk about it, we're going to let it fizzle out and hope that the behavior doesn't come back. The book also talks about how class rules and procedures should be self-regulatory, so helping students understand how to do it themselves, and they should also be appropriate for the grade level. We will talk about that when I get to my takeaways, but a big thing is they say that there should be procedures and policies in place throughout the school, not just one teacher's classroom, so that as students get older, as they go from lower elementary to upper elementary, middle school, high school, they take on more responsibility and more accountability for how the class community runs, and it is not so restrictive so that, you know, you have a high schooler who is being treated like an elementary student. And giving students that accountability and the consequences for those actions, whether those be positive or negative, that's really the focus, rather than on punishing a student or making them quote unquote feel sorry. They specifically gave classroom rules, an example of classroom rules, take care of yourself, take care of others, take care of the environment, as examples of classroom rules. Should be short. You shouldn't have like a super long list, because then that becomes harder to consistently go back to and consistently reinforce, and for students just to remember all of them. And they should also be framed in the positive. What do students do rather than what they don't do? The last big thing that was kind of stood out was the building of tools and a school-wide focus on behavior management rather than kind of a patchwork or quilt work in different classrooms. And so having a lot of school-wide policies and school-wide behaviors allows students to constantly reinforce whatever the policy or procedure is. That way they're getting it from, their first period teacher, second period, third period, or if it is a self-contained classroom, they get it with every academic area and not just, oh, this is only what we do in this specific classroom, this specific time. So having a school-wide network really does help. And then giving students the tools so that they can learn how to manage conflict, or so that they internalize the regulation of their thoughts and the reflection of their behavior, how their behavior harms others, how they have been harmed by certain behavior, and then the better choices that can be made in the future. Finally, my takeaways. What is going to stay with me now that I have read this book, and what am I going to implement starting next week when we go back to school? The first thing are the class rules. I'm going to get a poster. I'm going to use those class rules. Take care of yourself, take care of others, take care of the space. And I am going to teach students which policies and procedures are aimed to help them do X, Y, and Z. And so, them not having to ask to go to the bathroom is them taking care of themselves. But setting a time limit is taking care of others, because other people need to be able to go to the bathroom. And having the absent work and the late work in a certain spot is taking care of themselves. They can go ahead and go to that space. And also taking care of the environment, putting those things back where they belong, or putting the books back on the shelf, not leaving food and trash everywhere, taking care of the space. And so that really is going to be the first day. We're going to talk about those rules, and we're going to talk about how the policies and procedures fit into all of those rules to help them learn how to self-regulate and follow those rules. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be more consistent with the restorative practice sheets and the check-ins. I was okay at kind of giving them out, and I was okay at checking in, 1 week, but it was really inconsistent on an individual level. And though I did a lot of community building circles and restorative justice circles as a whole class, I wasn't too great at being consistent with checking in afterwards. And so I am going to do better. I've already created some of these sheets, so I'll show them on the screen now. You can see what's going on. There are reflection sheets. There is a victim impact sheet, so that the victim gets to kind of process what's happened to them and the things they want to say to the person who did the harm, and what can be done to make it right, because we don't want to leave off with no solution or no plan of action. And then check-in conference sheets, things like that I'm going to try to be better at using in my classroom consistently. Another thing that they talked about is having a response already ready to go for action. So not being so reactionary, but having kind of logical steps, logical procedures. If a student does X, Y, and Z, then these are the things that are going to happen. I think this is going to be really important for me, so that I'm not reacting immediately with anger as the first emotion of like, how dare they, they're doing this, they're being disrespectful to my classroom or to my time, or, I've told them X, Y, and Z so many times. Now I'm irritated. Now I am less likely to help them manage the behavior, and I am more likely to come from a punishment mindset rather than a teaching mindset. And so I am going to kind of have a list of behaviors ready to go and how I'm going to respond to them. The next thing that I'm going to use is I've always used community circles in my teaching, but I've never used them as a academic way for students to like talk about their tests or debrief an assignment or talk about what success might look like on that assignment. That was something that one of the teachers used in the book, and so I want to try that out to see if that can be successful in my classroom. The next takeaway that they had is having an onboarding system. So if you have a student who comes in after the first few days, or after the first 2 weeks, they said a lot of times those students miss those policies and procedures. They miss the community building, and so those students feel a little awkward, or teachers forget that that student came in after all of those policies were taught, and so are not as understanding when the student doesn't understand those policies and procedures. And so I'm going to have an onboarding document that'll say, welcome to the class. Here are the few things you need to know. Here is your syllabus. Here is what I wish Miss B knew about me, so they can write to me whatever they want to talk about. And then, these are the key lecture notes you need to take. Welcome to the class again. And just having that already ready so that when I get a new student after the first few weeks, I'm not playing catch up with them and they're not feeling so, just thrown to the wolves of just starting class after all of those community building processes have begun. The last takeaway I have is allowing students more opportunities to facilitate and self-regulate. So letting them, after I have modeled, of course, letting them kind of lead restorative circles or thought circles, letting them lead conflict mediation meetings, letting them lead when something has happened and they grab one of the restorative justice sheets that I showed earlier, allowing students more autonomy in the classroom, especially because my students are high school students. They are going to be graduating and going off into the work world or the higher education, and so baby stepping them into understanding how these adult policies, procedures, behaviors are supposed to work. So that is my takeaway, my overview of Better Than Carrots or Sticks. I really, really like this book. It is going to become one that when I feel like my behavior management is just not cutting it, I am going to be coming back to this book over and over again. So if you've read this book, let me know what were some of your takeaways or kind of some of the big moments that you really resonated with. If you have not read this book, are you interested? What are some of your classroom management policies or procedures or things you do? I would love to hear it, and I know everybody else watching would love to hear it. So the next book I will be talking about is The Together Teacher, so I'll see you then. In the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!